Well, please welcome award-winning actress, playwright, author, and activist, Anna Deavere Smith. That was sensational. Thank you so much for doing what you do. What was it that started you on the path to create Notes from the Field?
Well, I was invited to, can everybody hear?
Yep.
Is it working? Okay. I was invited to hear about the School to Prison Pipeline. I'd never heard about it in like 2011. And someone at the had invited me to hear from a lot of people who work on it. Like I spent a day with people from all over the country who work with children and work with schools. And I heard a lot of stories. And one story in particular was about my hometown, Baltimore, about a kid who had peed in a water cooler and they were going to send him to jail. Well, now after 250 interviews, I'm like, yeah, that's what would happen. But then, before I knew anything about this, I was just amazed, and it blew my mind, and it stuck with me. And at the time, we were filming Nurse Jackie, and I know y'all all remember from our show the wonderful British actress Eve Best, who played Dr. O'Hara. And we were in hair and makeup, and I said, I just heard this terrible story about a kid who peed in a water cooler, and they were going to send him to jail. And she said, well, whatever happened to mischief? And that was a turning point for me, because I thought, right, rich kids get mischief, poor kids get pathologized and sent to prison. So that was the turning point for me.
Yeah. You had mentioned that you had over 250 interviews. There's 18 beautiful interviews in this. What was the process like of weeding them down?
Well, for people in the audience who have seen my theater before, they know I've been working this way for many years, almost 40 years now, and with the first piece getting any attention at all, a play about the New York area, about Crown Heights, Brooklyn, my play Fires in the Mirror, about riots that happened there. And so all of these plays are under an umbrella called On the Road, A Search for American Character. And so I always cast a very wide net for Twilight Los Angeles. That play, I did over 320 interviews. And so, you know, you just start with, I get to the rehearsal hall with all this stuff. And there's some people who, you know, they have to be in it, like Kevin Moore, the first speaker who filmed the beating of Freddie Gray. Just the way he talked, you know, at the moment that he says, you know, a crush larynx, can you do that to you? In my mind, I'm going, he has to be in the play. And then it's a process of trying to make that make sense. And that's, you just start with a little thing like that, and it builds out.
Yeah. Were there specific things about your research that surprised you the most?
Everything. I mean, I had been, you know, I come from teachers. My mother was a teacher, all my aunts. It's really what a black woman could do in those days. And so I was shocked to begin with at the state of public education. That hasn't really been a part of my own life for a very long time. And everything shocked me. Stockton, California, when we went there, it was a bankrupt city, homicide-ridden. I wouldn't even let my crew stay there. We stayed, you know, an hour away at Sacramento. I was so scared. The Indian reservation, I'd never been, you know, spent a lot of time on a reservation. The state of things there amazed me. So there was plenty to be surprised about every day.
Yeah, yeah. Putting all the interviews together, how long did it take you to turn into a play?
Well, I started workshopping this in 2014, and, you know, worked at Berkeley Rep. I worked at the American Repertory Theater, and that's really when I committed to this particular version. And then with the movie, there are some differences between the movie and the play. A lot also having to do with how it was edited. We had to get it down to 89 minutes. So, you know, pretty much when I'm writing a play, I come in and I just start acting the parts, and then you know, I see what everybody thinks, and then I go home and write another play every night. So, but, you know, so I have this deadline of 4 weeks. It's always too long. And on the last dress rehearsal, we're all sitting around my dressing room. I'm exhausted after performing. You know, the last preview is going to open tomorrow night. I'm exhausted. And we're all sitting there fighting about, you know, then the artistic director comes in by then, you know, because it's like, this is too long, you know. And you just sit there fighting about who's going to get killed off at that point.
Yeah.
You know, because it's always about time. Like, you got to get it down to what's palatable for people.
Because you continue to write up until you open, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, at that point, the director shuts you down because of the cues, right?
So you blame it on the director, right?
Well, I would change it every night, but they won't let me do that.
Yeah.
Maybe we could think of a way, you and I will do that
All right.
ourselves right in here at
I
this
love
theater.
that, right? We could do it, right? Go right ahead. I love that. Have some of the people that you interviewed for the play come to see it?
Almost all of them have.
So tell me about what it was like. Yeah. What was it like getting them in when they sat through the play?
Well, it's the movie, you know, and again, I have to really, I don't think I've praised HBO nearly enough in our talking so far. So quickly, I want to make a public thanks to HBO for doing this. I want to make a public thanks, and Niall is here. Niall, stand up and be seen. Niall's here. And Niall, by the way, you know, in case you don't know, there's a huge shindig for HBO going on at Lincoln Center right now, and Niall is here missing all that. So thank you, Niall. And, you know, Jonathan Demme had seen the play in previews and wanted to make a movie of it. And so, as you know, we lost him, and he, before he died, asked Kristi Zea, who was one of his, you know, longtime production designers, one of the, you know, among the best of her generation. And so she stepped up. And all of Jonathan's team felt that they had to do this movie as a part of his legacy. So it was an enormous gift to me. And we literally went to his memorial service, and then, you know, the next day we were working on the movie. So, you know, that was all just the incredible experience of having this be a movie, and it is available to more people. Yesterday or Sunday, me and two of my whiz kids went down to Baltimore to re-interview Denise Dotson, the woman who's incarcerated, who talks about dogs. She got out in January.
That's wonderful.
And, you know, after 25 years in prison for first-degree murder. And, you know, one of the people who really helped me meet her at the end towards the end of the interview, she said to me, "Well, tell Denise how many people have seen this. What kind of people have seen her story?" And, you know, it meant, you know, the fact that, you know, all kinds of people saw it. All kinds of people. Mayor of New York saw it. Oprah Winfrey saw it. All kinds of people who came to the theater, and then so many more who have been able to see the movie know about what happened to her.
It's life-changing. They're all my favorite characters, but she is so heartfelt to find out why she was put away. Makes no sense at all, and what she does with the dogs. Do you have a favorite?
No, I really don't. You know,
it's like, who are your favorite kids? You can't really ask that question.
Although my brother was the favorite. I know I was chopped liver, but that is true. But you know, first of all, for someone to end up in the play, there's been this enormous process of the, you know, I write a different play every night, right? Different cities. And for somebody to survive all of that, you know, it's not about favorites. It's about, you know, in a way, you can't be in a play of mine if you don't have a strong will to communicate. What I say is, you know, I'm looking for the people who would scream it from a mountaintop, you know, and that's what all these people are. So, you know, somebody like Taos, the guy in Waiters, has been in this since the very, very first iteration of a workshop, right? Some people just made it through the whole thing. Others got left by the wayside and then come in and go out. So there's really no favorites, really aren't. I love everybody up there. And every single time I go back to work, and you know that we're taking it to London, we're leaving next week to be a part of a festival in London at the Royal Court Theatre. And, you know, every single time that I go back into rehearsal, I notice different things. I know there's a lot of actors here, so you might be interested. For a long time, I mean years, if you asked me what it was I was listening to about a person, I would say, well, you know, everybody's kind of singing a song in language, and that I'm very attracted to their passion. What I realized when I went into rehearsal again is every single person here, regardless of their status in society, regardless of how educated they are or not, is extremely intelligent about something, and much more intelligent than I am. So about it. So like the kid who talks about running from the cops, he's much more intelligent about police officers in the hood than I'm ever going to be. So this time around, I'm really listening for what is the quality of that intellect.
Because you're perfect. This is perfection. Watching her switch, right, from role to role. I know you've done many of these shows, but who was the easiest to learn, and who was the most challenging for you?
Well, Sherilyn Ifill, because she speaks in, you know, flawless, complete sentences. She's the first person to speak. She's the head of the NAACP National, Legal Defense Fund. I think Alan, the kid I just talked about, was very hard, very hard. Very, very interesting sentences, very interesting constructs. Kevin, who comes before him, who spent most of his life in jail and has extraordinary verbal acuity, was easy to learn. He read the dictionary backwards and forwards while he was in prison. And I think John Lewis was kind of easy because he comes right to your heart. But I would say Alan was one of the hardest people to learn. Yeah, that's what I would tell you.
Interesting. We have some questions from the audience, since we have a lot of actors here tonight. When working on something like this, what's the priority, aesthetic value or educational value? And if it's the latter, is it the sort of show that can be licensed to high school students to perform? And this is from Dan Chen. Where's Dan? Fabulous, great question.
Hi, Dan. Are you a teacher in high school? Yeah, I want schools to do this. You know, that's always been my objective. And, you know, often it's private schools that do this work. My play, Twilight Los Angeles, private school in Princeton did it. I went out and saw at a fancy, fancy school outside of LA, you know, the kids, you know, doing Twilight. And it's important to me that kids from anywhere get to embody these characters. I think sometimes the teachers cast them by type, you know, just because the roles are interesting. But what I really wanted, the Friends School in Philly, when they did Fires in the Mirror, they just put all the names of the characters in a hat, and the kids had to pick a name, and that's who they had to be. And then you don't have to worry about, oh, if I'm white, can I do Alan? You know, I mean, you know, can I do, no, if it's a hat, you pick the name, and there you are. Which one would you be horrified to have to play?
I'd play all of them. I love them. I'd play all of them. Wouldn't you?
So I feel that, you know, I am a teacher. I'm still a teacher. I've been teaching for a very long time. I am an educator. I come from educators, as I said. And I think that there's so much for students to learn by putting themselves, you know, my grandfather said when I was a girl, if you say a word often enough, it becomes you. And that's really been my life's work, is putting myself in other people's words, the way you put yourself in other people's shoes, trying to become America word for word. So I think as a civics lesson, as a history lesson, it's a great opportunity for kids to put themselves in the shoes of America. So I really want this to be in high schools and for kids to play it.
Beautiful. It must be really great to see all these different schools of every, you know, demographic do your plays.
Well, yeah, well, it's usually rich kids, I have to say. And it's because rich kids have acting class. I mean, they snatched it out, right? I mean, I grew up in a segregated city. It's segregated, elementary school. We had, we had theater. We had French lessons. We had gym. They don't have any of that anymore. And so that's why, and I'm happy that rich kids get to do it because they're going to be leaders and they need to develop an empathy for this country and for people who are less off than them. But I wish that kids who are in bad situations could play this play so that they could understand that they are change agents, that they can make a difference. And I'll give you the perfect example. When we were in Baltimore, we were there to do the research by accident right after the riot. And a young lady who was a Baltimore native was with us the whole time. In fact, she helped us find the guy who videoed Freddie Gray. We were driving down the street, and she goes, I think that's the guy who did the video of Freddie Gray. Stop the car, jump out, run down the street, follow him down to the projects, for the very sight of the thing. But she came, I did a sort of a reading workshop-y kind of thing in Baltimore at the Center Stage Theater, packed, and she brought with her Freddie Gray's best friend. He had never seen a play before. He cried and cried and cried and could not be consoled. And he told her that seeing the play was his first opportunity to grieve the death of his friend. And then, of course, she drove him to the corner where he was going to be selling drugs in the evening, right? All evening. But I think to deny such a great portion of America, not just poor kids, even middle-class kids, with this idea that we've got to pay complete attention to reading and writing and science and technology, this opportunity to have an empathic experience and to, have their imaginations come wide open. I really think as we start, many of us here are concerned about the state of the country right now, that, one of the things that we as actors really champion is getting arts back into our schools. We need it.
I love how you find your interviewees to do, like you just said, in the car in Baltimore, I think that's the guy. How did you find some of the other people?
Well, you start with I start with a very short list of people, and you just start with that person, and they tell you about somebody else, and they tell you about somebody else, and it's really as simple as that. You can read in the paper, find somebody you want to talk to, but it's really as simple as that. They tell you about. I remember we were in South Africa, and I was looking at AIDS when it was at the height. The president was denying it. It literally was, I know a man with boils. If you go, 10 miles down that road into the sugarcane fields, you're going to find him. Like that type of thing.
Wow. Did you ever document the behind the scenes?
We are for this. We have we're doing that for this. Our objective is to make a behind the scenes piece about it.
That's fascinating. Can't wait to see that. This is a question from Paula Fleischer. Do you find that one character from your various plays stays with you? Which one, and why do you think that's so?
Yeah, well, from Fires in the Mirror, I'm never going to forget Roz Malamud, who, on the one hand, considers herself so close to me. Like, she'd call me up and say, after Fires in the Mirror had, closed and everything in New York, Anna Deavere Smith, it's Roz Malamud. I want you to invite you to my grandson's bris. And she felt that she could say intimate things to me like, it's a tragedy that you didn't have children. You're smart, right? However, when 60 Minutes did a piece on me and Ed Bradley, and they thought, well, who are some people who would be great if we could get some of the Lubavitch to talk about you? I said, well, Roz will. Let's go over to Crown Heights. Here's the camera on Roz Malamud. She's not from here. What does she know? I guess I'm never going to forget Roz Malamud.
I love it. That's hilarious. I love that. This is from Lillian Isabella, who is currently working on her own documentary play. How closely do you try and recreate the subjects? Do you sometimes find creative interpretation necessary?
Well, I don't, but everybody, everybody should do their own thing. I happen to be very interested in the music of voice, so that means that the words that people make are notes in a song, and that's my interest. But there are other interests that other people have, and there is no doctrine. The field's wide open for further development. I think I invite you. It's wide open for further development.
Okay. The second part of that is, do you seek approval from your subjects for their final monologues in your shows?
No, I mean, we don't do that. I mean, somebody's laughing because you have an idea of what that would be like, I guess.
Are you Lillian? Where's Lillian? Great.
No, they sign a release, yeah. And that's, then that's it.
Yeah, good. How did you create the specific formatting of the monologues in your published works?
Well, at first I thought, when I was younger and, I don't know, more frontiersy, I thought that everything should be written the way I wrote it out to learn it. But, people don't understand that. It's kind of like, what is this? Yeah. What is this? Poems. What is it? So I have an assistant who makes it look like normal talking, and it makes everybody happier. So that's, we just transform sort of my score, really, into things that people can read right across the page. So that it also, it allows the people who've given me their stories and given me these incredible insights to be appreciated in prose. It's just two different forms. If I didn't used to have a script. And for Fires in the Mirror, which was the first play that, really needed a whole team of people who had to have a script to know what's going on closing night at the Public Theater, the stage manager came into my dressing room and said, I have a present for you, and it was the script. So for me, the script is a notation of what people said to me. But that's because I'm in the oral tradition. And, in antiquity, the orators had to learn these enormous, we'll call them texts. The stories were all in memory, and it came out of your mouth. And, of course, there's cultures in the world where people are not literate, and they're still in the oral tradition. The fact is that we're post-printing press, and there's some good things about that. And so I'm glad that I also have the option of putting it in form to be read.
Beautiful. The film is so beautifully edited. Let's talk about the editing process and you working hands-on with your director, and your editor, was it Paul Snyder? Yeah. Talk about being in the room and doing that.
Well,
how long it took.
We spent the summer, really. We spent the summer doing it, and then, you get notes, and then you keep working, and we were saying backstage, and I'm not just saying because Niall is here. One of the things that I felt was a real gift in all of this is the respect with which the folks at HBO treated us. We all knew it had to get down to 89 minutes, but I found their notes extremely helpful. I enjoyed talking with them about that. But it was a hot summer last summer, and we were inside a black room for most of it, and we really bonded, I got to tell you, me and Kristi and Paul.
Talk about the music. The music is stunning in this, right?
And so is the musician stunning.
Well, I wanted you to say that. Talk about him. Talk about.
Well, usually the first person I approach when I'm making a piece is Ann Ward, my costume designer, who's worked with me in the theater for a long time. And even this time, before Ann, I had met Marcus in San Francisco doing something else. We taught something together because the guy who runs San Francisco Jazz Festival, heard I was looking for a musician, and he said I should talk to Marcus. And so, Marcus came on to this immediately. I brought him to New York. He listened to some of the tapes of the people. He went and met some of the people. He became very involved in the problem itself as a result of doing this. He goes twice a month to a juvenile facility and just stands around with his bass to see if anybody wants to come up and talk. And so, he is, you know, he's a real gift to the project. I've been interested in working with musicians. I had another piece I did, Letter from a Birmingham Jail, with Bobby McDuffie, a concert violinist. And I worked for a long time on a piece called On Grace that just stayed in workshop, but extraordinary, with a concert cellist, Joshua Roman. The bottom line is I don't really want to go on stage by myself anymore. And given the fact that I talk about music a lot, you know, the music of the language, you know, it's time to be accompanied live. I've always had musicians involved. Josh Redman, the great jazz saxophonist, did the music for Let Me Down Easy. So it's a new kind of company to be keeping with musicians, and they're always hypersensitive to the matter, and sensitivity in a different way than we are in the theater.
You play off each other beautifully in this piece, as you did on stage. I had the privilege of seeing this play twice at Second Stage, and I stayed afterwards because the audience members didn't want to go after this show stopped, some of you who were there, of course, and they wanted to continue the conversation. Do you hope the film will reach a larger audience and expand and continue the conversation that you started in the play?
Yes, and in fact, the earlier versions of the play were made completely with the eye on conversation, so that actually we only played one act of the play, and then we stopped. Me and Marcus, I talked as myself, he talked as himself, and we said, you know what, we've done what we can do here, but we know that there are people out here who know a lot more about this than we do, have a lot more resources than we do, so you're act two. And we broke audiences of 500 people up into groups of 20, and they went out and they had facilitated conversations. As you know, real estate in New York doesn't really allow for that, so we weren't able to do that here in New York City. But the mission of this project is to not just raise awareness, but cause people to want to come together and do something about this problem in their community, and to realize, you know, the fancy people, the fancy sociologists use this word proximity now, that you may think this has nothing to do with you, right? But as Denise, who tells us from Maryland Correctional Institute, we're all connected somehow to every other single living thing. And so it's this, I want people to see it and think about, you included, you know, what does this have to do with me? It has something to do with me. If for no other reason, the failure of a moral imagination in this country, that we have to do something about it, that we have to restore ourselves, we have to recover from greed and selfishness. And so,
you were working on this piece during the Obama administration, and now there is a very drastic shift in leadership in our country. How does Notes from the Field resonate in today's climate?
Well, it's interesting that I wrote it during the Obama administration. President Obama was very aware of my doing it. Eric Holder came to see it in New York City. Valerie Jarrett is very aware, who's in the news today, very aware of this project, invited me to the White House to be a part of a fireside chat. And it was the Obama administration that released the data to show us that Black, brown, Native American children are disciplined more harshly than whites, and then end up on this terrible road we call the school-to-prison pipeline. But the fact of the matter is, obviously, if the Obama administration saw the problem, revealed the depth of the problem was already here. It's not that it's starting in the Trump administration. And I think anybody who has been involved in civil rights in this country knows that there are even limitations to what government can do and what the law can do. This country never passed anti-lynching legislation. The attempt at getting a bill to make lynching illegal began in 1915 with the first president of the NAACP. When approached about anti-lynching legislation, he was against it because he didn't think it was constitutional. A good man, but other, so there's this way in which we're trapped by the law, and we're a country of laws. We've always needed people to work on the outside of the realm of the law the outside of what is written to push the Constitution to come into its real possibility. And so we're in a very distressing time. But I think even what we saw with what Howard Schultz decided to do about the events at Starbucks by shutting down today is providing an idea of what CEOs can do, what business, leadership in business can do. I think all of you in this audience have a potential to use your positions to provide leadership, moral leadership in the arts. And so in that way, I don't underestimate the seriousness of this moment, but the door is open for people to provide new kinds of leadership. And the fact of poor children, and I don't know if it's in this version of the play, when we finally got Brown versus Board of Ed, the schools in Virginia shut down for 5 years rather than have integrated schools. When we went to South Carolina, we found out that as soon as Brown versus Board of Ed passed, white people made private schools so they wouldn't have to go to school with black kids. So a lot of people say we're worse off 60 years later, that we're more segregated than ever. So this problem goes on regardless of the administrations. And that just shows us how important it is for us not to rely on government and to find our way to our values.
Beautifully put. What are you the proudest of with this beautiful film?
Boy, I think I'm proudest of all the people who came around it. Or I don't know if I'm proud or if I'm grateful. I'm grateful that, it meant so much to me for Jonathan to immediately, before it was reviewed, before anything, say, I want to make a movie of this. He actually said, I want this to be my last movie. I didn't know he was sick when he said that. For all of the people around his beautiful, beautiful team to say, we have to proceed as part of Jonathan's legacy. For Kristi to step aboard as a first-time director and take this on. For Paul to spend the summer with us. For HBO to come on board. I've had better marketing with HBO than anything in my whole life. And so I don't know if I'm proud. I know I'm grateful.
I just love how many people are now going to be able to see this film due to HBO. But I want to thank you for doing what you do with your art and getting it out there for people to listen and to make a change.
Well, let me just say that for me, everything begins with a question.
Yeah.
And I even tell my students that, your education shouldn't be about answers. It should be about finding answers. It should be finding questions. What is your question? What is your question that's going to keep you up at night? It needs to be a good one because it needs to keep you up at night your whole life. And so I want to thank you for your questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, Anna Deavere Smith. The best. Anna Deavere Smith.